Welcome to the Logic of AI Magic. We talk a lot about the infinite possibilities of AI, but today we are taking those possibilities into one of the most unforgiving environments on the planet, the global supply chain. When you think about ERP systems and logistics, you think about precision, rigidity, and absolute exactness. But when you think about AI, you often think about probability and creativity. So, what happens when these two worlds collide? How do you introduce AI into a system where trust and reliability aren't just buzzwords, but the difference between a product arriving on time or a global bottleneck? To help us explore these chain reactions, I'm thrilled to welcome Jim McCullen. Jim is the Chief Technology Officer at Century Supply Chain Solutions and brings over 30 years of industry experience to the table. He isn't just an executive, he's a builder who developed the first iteration of Century's proprietary platform VMS and is also the author of Control Your Day, a new approach to email and time management using Microsoft Outlook. We all need that. Jim, it's great to have you on. Before we dive into tech, could you give us a brief overview of your background and the work you've been doing at Century?
Sure, Binny. Yeah, great to be here. So my name is Jim McCullen. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Century Supply Chain Solutions. Maybe just a bit about myself first. So I've been in the supply chain space for over 3 decades, building supply chain solutions for top importers around the world. Super passionate about what I do in supply chain, but also super passionate about mountain biking. So if any of your listeners are in the Virginia area and they want to check out our mountain bike trails, just reach out and let me know. Maybe give you a little bit of an intro of who Century is and what we do there. So Century is a global logistics company. As I mentioned, we're hired by large retailers, manufacturers, distributors. So our customers include Amazon, Trader Joe's, Dick's Sporting Goods, Abercrombie. So anybody that's shipping anywhere from thousands of containers to hundreds of thousands of containers of freight a year. We have offices all around the world in over 70 countries. And our job is to be at the front end of those customer supply chains. So the customer nominates Century, our teams, and our Visive platform. And Visive is our supply chain management operations and visibility platform. And so we sit between the importers' vendors and their transport providers. And we coordinate everything that's happening to make sure the vendors are shipping the right product to the right destination at the right time, and that we're selecting the right transport providers to get the product there as efficiently as possible. We do all of that with our teams and with our Visive platform, which is tightly integrated with our customers' ERP systems, warehouse management systems. So it creates one source of truth for our customers' global supply chains.
Wow, that's awesome, Jim. I've always wondered, when I go and click buy on Amazon.com or if I go and do buy Alibaba, and then magically something appears at my door sometimes in a day, sometimes in a week, like how many different systems or how many different hands that it had to, you know, go from. Can you give me an idea of like the complexity of the supply chain? As consumers, we probably don't understand, but you've been in this industry. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, more than 30 years or like 38 years working. I think you're the person who knows most about this, I could say, like close to 40 years of experience. So please shed some light. When I click buy, what happens?
Well, first off, I started extremely young in this in my career in supply chain, and we certainly didn't have a lot of the tech that we have today. But what your listeners need to understand is that there's so much that takes place before that product is available for you to click that button and have it
Hmm.
delivered. And so that's what's happening on the front end. When you think about lead times in supply chain, lead time could be anywhere from maybe 30 days to, 180 days, 6 months or more, even at sometimes that your retailer or person that you're purchasing that product from has gone through the process and found that vendor to source that product, sourced the product, moved it through the entire supply chain, and gotten it to their distribution center so that when you click that button, it can be at your doorstep the next day. And so, your question around the players, there's thousands of players involved in that process. So we have, very large customers of ours who have thousands of
Mhm.
suppliers that are delivering goods to hundreds of transport providers. And then those goods are moving, across oceans, across air, across land, getting to distribution centers around the world to be ready to ship to you, to stores, to
Wow.
consumers
And then add
everywhere.
to it the geopolitics and all sorts of things. And I mean, it must be messy and very complicated.
It it certainly is, yeah. And it's, I think years ago, like we've gone through kind of peaks and valleys in supply chain timing, right? And in some cases, years ago, it was very smooth
Hmm.
and calm for the most part, right? And things just happen the way you expected them to happen in the supply chain. Since COVID, really, everything has changed. And so, we've seen dramatic impacts to the supply chain, initially because of COVID, because of geopolitical reasons, because of climate situations that have created impacts that no one was expecting, no one planned for. And so, I know the word agility is overused, but truly being agile in your supply chain is a critical must have component today because you can plan as much as you want, but you just can't anticipate some of these things that have materialized in the recent years.
Mm,
And so yeah, it's a challenging environment, but it's one that at Century, actually, it's one of the reasons I've been here as long as I have been because there is always a new challenge, right? Like there's always something new to work on, and the greatest part of it is with the technologies that we're seeing today, we can almost solve these problems in real time with the capabilities that we have compared to
got it.
years ago.
So, yeah, talking about technology. So now let's dive into it. So, now we have established supply chain is extremely complex. It's a messy environment, and including tariffs. They keep on changing the dynamics of
Mhm.
what needs to be shipped and when. We had a customer who actually had to divert a ship to another country just to save on the tariffs and figure out what's going to happen. And then they're paying the fees, extra fees of keeping the container at a different port, and then doing the math on demand, trying to figure out should we ship and pay the tariff or wait and maybe not pay the tariff or maybe pay double the tariff. Now, in this kind of environment, Jim, how are you looking at AI? Because it's a hard problem. Now, does AI come in and give you more tools and more hope or more power? Like, talk about your view on AI.
Sure. So it does from a number of different areas, and maybe to talk kind of the simplest components first, especially in the logistics space, right? And so logistics has always been a people business, and every customer's supply chain is unique and special, and that requires special handling in how you deliver that business, right? What we've been able to achieve with AI and automation at the ground level is this ability to automate mundane, repeatable tasks, right? So things that normally a person would have been doing, these AI solutions can easily replicate and perform over and
Hmm.
over again, right? So those people can be used for more valuable, powerful functions, right? And those are things like Copilot and ChatGPT and Power Automate, basic tools that, and part of it too is that, as AI has been interlaced into tools like Power Automate, it makes it that much easier and faster to be able to deliver those things. Same thing as we kind of step up a little bit and start to talk about document translation, right? So in our industry, it's not paper based, but still lots of PDF documents flying around. So I mentioned before, it's hundreds of transport providers that we're dealing with, and each one has their documents, like a bill of lading, for example, in different formats. And yes, there's EDI and APIs and other things like that. But in a lot of cases, you've got to be able to translate that document, right? And so the earlier OCR systems were okay at that, in that, yes, you could run it through OCR and translate a document. But as soon as something was different with that document,
Hmm.
it broke, right? And you had to bring a developer in and figure out, okay, how do I create a template for this? That's gone today, right? With the systems, the both computer vision systems and OCR systems tied into LLMs to be able to really understand what that document is communicating. It can read and translate all different versions of documents into data very, very quickly, right? And so that layer has helped to greatly accelerate um, the speed of processing and the use of that. And then we get into like much more advanced capabilities, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. But the very targeted AI
Got it, got
solutions
it,
that
got
we're
it.
delivering.
Now, when people are using AI, a lot of people ask me, is like, how do I trust it, right? Because AI is smart, but anything smart, you have to build trust. Like with humans, I'm talking to some people, I've tried to figure out, are their values aligned with my values? Do they do what they actually say they are going to do? Um,
Mm.
are they biased against me, or maybe have some biases that don't align with my own business's point of view? So it's all about building trust. How are you building trust with AI?
Yeah, a lot of it is so. Like I was saying, we have targeted AI solutions that we've built. For example, we have an AI routing engine that makes
Hmm.
routing decisions for international shipments. And so it uses all of the source data that we have around the carrier allocations, carrier contracts, when something needs to be at a destination. Um, but what we've done is in a lot of cases we've created it with a human in the loop specific feature. And so what happens is today the AI makes the decision and ranks this routing as number one. But we have our teams looking at that and making the final decision as to yes, I want that option, or no, I want an alternative option, right? So right now in that particular solution, we have people in the middle of it, but where we're working towards is being able to have the KPIs, the analytics, the real-time feedback to give that operator, that team, the trust that the AI is using the right information to make the right decision, right? So in most cases, that's the way we've handled it. Is we start with the AI is aiding that person in doing their job, right? And then it's really in essence, it's one of my team had said it creates superpowers
Hmm.
for our teams, right? So it allows them to do much more you know work and deliver higher qualities of work with the AI
Got
supporting
it.
them. Does
Yeah,
that make
yeah, Jim.
sense?
It reminds me of an analogy, like in the industrial age, if you remember. Before people would do things manually, like with a shovel, dig into the field, and then came the tractor. That was a superpower, right? I mean, you sit on the tractor, you can do
Hmm.
what 100 people do. I mean, same thing as like if I'm a tailor and I didn't have a sewing machine and I had to do it with my hand. When the sewing machine came in, it was a superpower, all right? But the tailor has to be there with the sewing machine for a shirt to be stitched. If the tailor is sleeping, then nothing is happening, right? That to me
Hmm.
is the co-pilot era, where
Yes.
the AI is helping you become faster at whatever you're doing. AI is your kind of additional booster, if you will. I think that where we are going is where the industrial age also went, is going from a sewing machine for every person to a factory that can create shirts, right, and pants. So all of them. So basically, the humans then turn into quality check people, or people who maintain the health of the machine itself, but they are not needed to run the sewing machine. It's everything is automated, and the way the automation happens is one machine after the other in an assembly line. Um, and every machine is more powerful than the human, obviously, can do much faster, much more accurate, almost superhuman, every stage. But yet, it is doing things in a deterministic fashion. It has a start and an input and an output, and then humans are looking at it and refining it. There are people who are building the machines, and they'll look at the machines and every year make the machine faster and better. I think that's the same thing I'm observing happening in AI. We're going from the co-pilot era to an era where AI will become fully autonomous, and humans are there to do the same thing that we did, you know, in the factories, looking at the machines and making sure the quality is right. Same thing is going to happen with AI. Now, in your industry, in the supply chain, what's the maturity level of AI adoption, if you will? So if the end goal is fully autonomous AI running the entire supply chain, humans are brought in for policy making, for upgrading the quote unquote machines, but rest of it is working fully autonomous. If that's number 10 is 10 out of 10, and where are we
Right.
right now in that spectrum?
Yeah. So, I think it it varies depending on the particular functions within supply chain that you're talking about, right? So I think there's a lot of room to continue. Some of the challenges that we face in supply chain is still the quality of data that's available to make
Mm,
decisions. So I'll give you a great example of that. I mentioned that AI routing engine before. Well, one of the challenges in our industry is there is no single trusted source when of a vessel schedule um, that we can use to make those decisions. And it's a little bit crazy when you think about it. Like, think about if you're going to book a flight and you were to go to Kayak and try to book it, and it tells you one date that the plane's going
mm,
to arrive, and then you go to your airline and it tells you something different. And then you go somewhere else and it gives you a third answer. Well, that's actually what happens in the shipping industry right now. So we can go to these ocean carriers and to other sources and get different information about that same vessel. And these are massive vessels, right? And so that's a real challenge, and it's something that we're working through at Century to really figure out how do we score that data and figure out who we do trust, so that we can automate that. But to give you an example of a successful area of automation, fully for us in one area uh, is vendors will come in and they will create a
mhm,
booking with us, right? And that booking is going to get validated against the customer's purchase order. We have a framework within our Visive platform called Vibe, Validations Integrated by Event. And so Vibe
mm,
checks everything that the customer has instructed us to check. Are they shipping the right quantity to the right place? Is there an inspection required? Did it pass the inspection? Whatever that criteria is, right? And so when that vendor books, if Vibe looks at it all and says, yeah, everything is perfect, we auto confirm that back to the vendor. Nobody touches it.
yeah.
Now, a couple of years ago, every single booking would have been touched by a
Mhm.
person who would have looked at it and figured out, yeah, this is okay. Let me send it back. Right. The next step of that is now through AI being able to decide, okay, what's wrong and how do we fix it, right now we would then go off to the customer and say, hey, do you want to approve this or decline this, right? And so bringing that intelligence into it to be able to make the decisions based on all of the external and internal data that's available, right? So like, I know this is going to be late. I know how I can reroute this and get it to where it needs to go on time, right? So yeah, so there's pieces of logistics where in supply chain where it is definitely the AI is really enabled and adding value. There's other pieces where it's still work in progress.
When did you come up with the vibe term?
Yeah, it was way before vibe coding actually, so I think they stole that from us.
You could have trademarked it, right?
Uh, I'm still working on that.
But that's cool. But your vibe is different from today's vibe. Your vibe is
It
like
is.
actually about accuracy and getting it right. Whereas today's vibe, actually, let's talk about today's vibe, right? So we
Mhm.
have people doing vibe coding. I also saw an ad
Yep.
on the highway here yesterday, vibe working. I don't know what that means. Uh, basically, I show up and, but anyway, so when I'm vibe coding, people have concerns around two things. Trust, like, if I just
Mm.
said this is what I want to do, but I'm not going to look at how the system is going to, what the plan is of execution, all that, I can't trust. And at the same time, there's another problem of maintenance. While if I vibe code something that is trivial, maybe it is small, over time I can maintain it. But as you were talking about some more complex automation use cases, if you vibe over time, they will bloat. Um, and they'll
Mhm.
bloat not only because the business logic is complicated, but they're going to bloat because the edge cases are kind of unlimited. Now, if you keep on adding
Yep.
the logic of edge cases into your automation over time, it's definitely going to bloat. Like, look at any software. Over time, it bloats, the engineering team bloats, and the software finally falls apart. And then and then you rewrite the software. So, what I've been working on last 5 years is figuring out how you can solve the vibe coding problem in the sense that, first of all, separate planning and execution. So you can vibe all you want, but it must come up with a plan that is still in English, that is readable by the person who
Mm.
came up with the business logic and said, this is what happens. And then after that, when you go into execution mode, it should not be vibing, it should not be AI hallucinating, and just execute. Planning and execution, keep it separate. And then for maintenance, you take that whole automation and say, you know what, I'm going to separate happy and unhappy path. And this is like, for example, in your environment, if there is a logic of processing something, you'll write it down
Mm.
as an SOP and hand it over to somebody. But the ways in which things might break in the real world are kind of infinite. Anything can happen. Now, all that
Right.
logic, if you are forced to bake into the core automation, then it will bloat over time. But separating it out as separate troubleshooting guide, like in an airplane, I have a troubleshooting guide that's separate. It's a big fat book. And my main itinerary of where the plane needs to go today is a single pager. That kind of clean separation, I think that helps the vibe coding paradigm. How much of that applies to what you're doing, Jim?
Yeah, so a lot does. So certainly our teams are using AI tools and vibe coding for to support, and Visive is a large complex application, right? And so they will be using it to help guide them on components that we're adding to the solution, but it's not that they're just building code directly with it and just dropping it in. To your point, like they need to refine it. Where we are using AI directly in code development is we're looking at smaller applications that support that primary application. And those smaller applications we can build um, truly with AI solutions, right? And deliver them very, very quickly. And one of the real advantages to that is we can iterate in real time with the end users, right? So in that kind of an environment, we can model build the application and show it to them and
Mhm.
adjust it in real time. Now, in some cases, we then have to come back and make it scalable or bring the different layers in that we need so that we can tie it into the main application. And so that's something we're doing a little bit different today. Instead of just building everything as part of that core application, looking at where does it make sense for this to kind of be a standalone application that that can be built very quickly using these newer technologies. Another area that we've been doing a lot with, and it ties back to what you were just saying, is in business integrations. So we have to, when we bring on a new customer, we have to map to whatever integrations they have because they don't want to spend the time or money to build new integrations. So it might be old EDI integrations, it could be like CSV files, it could be APIs, could be anything, right? And so our business integration teams are now using AI to prototype everything that they need to do in that integration, and then we're going in and coding to your plan and
Mhm.
execution model, right? They're using that to build the plan, and that's saving them a ton of time compared to how they used to have to do it manually in Excel spreadsheets or other things like that. And then they can give the mapping developers just a clear footprint of this is what you need to do, and they can build it. And so we're able to accelerate that process much faster, and then we end up with still a very scalable, secure, stable integration. Over time, I do think the AI capabilities will be able to build those maps and integrations directly. But again, to your point, we need to be really careful because we're moving you know hundreds of thousands of transactions through these interfaces. We can't have anything kind of change in the middle of that, right? So it has to be stable and
Got it.
secure.
Got it. Let me change the topic to one area that I'm uh, have been working on. I call it the GIPA framework. I say framework we are trying to work on for figuring out what's the maximum harm that AI can cause, right? And I'll ask
Okay.
you. I mean, it's a hypothetical exercise. to come up with. So GIPA stands for generality, intelligence, power, and agency. These are four different dimensions in which you can think of what AI can do. So taking your industry, right? Let us figure out what's the maximum harm AI can do if it goes wrong, right? So pick any application of AI where you think you definitely AI can solve it. So, for example, self-driving cars is definitely AI can solve it. What's the maximum harm? I mean, somebody can die, right? Or more people can die, God knows. Um, so in your world, if AI is deployed and something goes wrong, what's the maximum damage that's possible?
Yeah, so there's a number of different areas, right? Most of it would come back to cost and goods availability. And so, for example, if the AI routing engine routes the cargo to the wrong place, there's a huge cost
No.
potentially to get those goods to the right place. And you could have a
So you
situation. Go
have to
ahead, sorry.
the ship has to turn back.
Well, not the ship, but once you got there, you'd have to put it on another ship and send
Okay.
it back. But also, like if those goods go into the wrong
Mm,
country, they're not going to be cleared into that
mm,
country, and they're going to be locked up somewhere and stuck, right? So you've got those types of issues that could take place. From a corporate perspective, you could have billing issues that where the AI is running billing
mm.
systems, and it goes wacky on that side of it, and all of a sudden you're not billing what you should be, or you're billing too much. So those are real issues. And so when we look at each shipment that we handle for a customer, every one of those shipments is critical to that customer, right? Think about manufacturing and assembly lines and other things like that. If that product doesn't get there when they're expecting it, could shut down their entire
Hmm.
line. So the costs could be dramatic if AI is making the wrong decisions. And when you think about, okay, it's making these decisions at speed, and we're moving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of containers a year. If you don't realize there's a problem with that AI for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's not one shipment anymore. It's hundreds of shipments potentially that are off in the
Yeah,
wrong
yeah.
place.
I saw an article you wrote on LinkedIn around automation exhaust. Um, can you talk a little bit about that a bit more, and does it apply to what you're talking about here in terms of knowing what's happening?
It absolutely does. Yeah. It's the so it's been really interesting to talk to developers on the team and see what types of information that's being collected that the AI systems are generating. And again, I'll go back just to that AI routing example as a simple one, right? In the past, when we have people
Mm,
routing those shipments, there's no picture, there's no exhaust data of their
mm.
decision. They made that decision, and but you can't really go back and really understand why did
It's
they
like
make that
tribal
decision, right?
knowledge. Okay.
Exactly. But with AI, we need all of that
Mm,
information for the AI to be able to make that decision. So we've recorded it. So we know we have a snapshot of exactly what was happening, what vessels were available to ship, when this product needed to move, how much allocation was available, right? All of that data exists and it's saved. And so now we can come back later and use that data to run scenarios, right? So what would happen if we had changed the priority, or maybe factored in sustainability to this model or focused on cost instead of transit? How would that have impacted things? And so we're not there yet. We're getting there, but we could
mm.
play these scenarios out for our customers. And so then you get into that kind of digital twin concept, right? Because you've got this exhaust data, the data that's being created by the AI, and you can use it for those types of things. And my in the article I mentioned, at this point, you should just be thinking about saving the data, even if you don't know what to
Absolutely.
do with the data, because you're gonna need it in
Mm,
the future. And again, it comes back to, fortunately at Century, our technical people understand the business. Our business people are very technical, but in a lot of companies, that's not the case. So you kind of need to bring these people together because the technical guys know that exhaust data exists, but they don't know the value of it. Whereas on the business side, they do understand it,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So just start thinking about how important
Yeah.
that could be.
Absolutely. In fact, at Cognitos, we were when we were talking about this problem 2 years ago. Um, talking to the business side, the question was, hey, how will this be better than what we have? Like, look, right now, the business says, this is what I want to be done, hands it over to IT. IT translates that English SOP or a PRD into some voodoo language, which is programming, right?
Hmm.
And then that eventually degrades, distances itself from really what the business wanted, because as you're hitting things in real life, you don't have time to update the main SOP. So that eventually gets completely stale. And now, as it is running, it does generate logs, but in a language that the business side cannot understand. So it basically creates an environment where the business actually starts losing control because of automation. And that's actually completely wrong, right? It should be that the business is empowered to understand what's happening. So we called it business journal, and you called it
Hmm.
automation exhaust. I mean, it's essentially AI should not have amnesia, right? I mean, there's no
Right.
intelligent being that cannot remember the past. You have to remember the past. So give the system good memory. That's the bottom line. And then the memory needs to be accurate. It should not be a recall where you can confabulate something. It has to be deterministically jotted down. All the if then else must be precise. um, I
Hmm.
almost create an analogy to this, to not humans but the Star Trek character called Mr. Spock. So Mr. Spock will
Hmm.
basically be very logical, do things logically, not be biased, not be emotional, but has a good interface to humans. I think you would like Spock running your your companies, like you. And you go, Spock, 10 years ago, what happened? Tell me precisely. And Spock says, boom, boom, boom. This is what happened. And it's not like a human trying to guess, and then they might get something wrong. The value of that data is immense. And we talk about digital twins right now. My personal take is, we're creating digital twins of humans, but very soon AI will get into a world where there is no human that can do the same thing. So there is no
Hmm.
digital,
I
right? I
would agree.
mean, because just like
Hmm.
machines run so fast, humans can't. Same thing will happen with AI. Will be almost super intelligent, and it's own being. The only thing that we need is for AI to be truthful. When we say, why did you make a decision, and it says, this is why, because based on the exhaust that you talked about. And then finally, if we ask it to change its behavior, it should document it. Okay, I'm going to change behavior because Jim told me on this date that I need to behave differently because policies have changed or whatever. And then always follows the documented policy there.
The ability to record that information and save it, is super important. To your point, to understand what the AI is doing, and then as changes are happening, to model it and make sure it's still doing what you're expecting it to do, right? So there's value there. And just to one of your points earlier too, when we were talking about AI, we had an offsite for a couple of days, and I did a session on AI with the group. And one of the team members brought up and said, well, if we implement all of these AI solutions, we'll lose the institutional knowledge that we have in the individuals. And I said, I think it's exactly the
Yes.
opposite. When somebody leaves the company, they take that institutional knowledge with
Yes.
them. If you build it into these AI solutions, to your point, that documentation exists right there. Like in Kognitos, for example, you can pull it up and see, like, okay, here's the instructions. This is what it's doing, right? And so I think it's exactly the opposite. Is that it is helping to build better documentation for what's
Yeah,
happening.
absolutely. Um, so the you know the what you just said is what happens with even humans, right? In your company, people come and go. The only way to keep the knowledge of the business intact when people come and go is to document it. We've done it with humans
Hmm.
for centuries. Even the
Right.
constitution of a country is the same thing. The founding fathers documented it so that when they're not here, everybody still knows what were the rules to run everything. Businesses do that all the time. And guess what? Even AI, we should do the same thing. Models keep on changing. I mean, models leave
Yep.
us more frequently than humans do. Gemin.
That's true.
And I'm like, if I had trained that model, prompt engineered according to that model, guess, in 3 months, that's gone. What will stay is the documented business philosophy and the business process. Jim, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Any parting thoughts for our viewers?
AI is moving at such a fast speed right now. You have to kind of jump in and stay abreast of what's changing. But you also have to kind of commit and deliver solutions for your organization, for your companies. And so if you're just constantly changing, you'll never get there, right? So I think it's really important to stay abreast of what's happening, but also recognize, like, let's find real business cases where these solutions work, apply them, and deliver that to the business.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you to all the viewers for tuning in into this episode of The Logic of AI Magic. Please subscribe, share, and tune in for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Binny.